Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today. Now, about a year and a half ago, I made a series of videos on pre-Columbus sites in America, and this was some very surprising research to me, and it kind of offended me that I had not heard of a lot of these sites. But the obvious ancient past of the United States is much more fascinating than we have been led to believe. And I'm going to talk about a few of these sites that I've already talked about, but I just want to share some new information, and I also have a lot of new subscribers, so I want to talk about a few of the important sites again. But one of them is Chaco Canyon in New Mexico here, and we're just going to fly in here. And this is what the general landscape looks like at Chaco Canyon. We're going to fly into the main complex here and give you an overhead shot. But this is what the main complex looks like. And this really surprised me when I read about this and took a look at some of the pictures. Now, the government in the United States has, wanted people to believe that the United States was founded just basically native country, just inhabited by some scattered primitive Native Americans, and that there was no sophisticated cultures living in what we know as the United States. But here, this coming from about 1,000 years ago at Chaco Canyon, this is a very sophisticated, and here is a look at some of those ruins. And back here we have a 3-story complex that was obviously inhabited by some very important people. We have a main central kiva, and there are ruins all around this area. And here is that video I did a little over a year ago, I believe, and 245 views. The apathy for native or ancient American history continues. I shouldn't say that, but anyway, I will leave the link for this video below. I think there's a lot of good information in it. Now, when I look at the ruins of Chaco Canyon, it seemed to me that this was much more of a sophisticated culture than what we see around the United States from early American sites, and this seemed a lot more like what we see in Mexico based on the architecture and the things that were found and the symbolism that came out of this place. Much more like Mexico than other sites around the United States, and it kind of flew in the face of what the government has wanted us to believe were the societies that were existing in the United States. So this and Cahokia is another one, but this is totally different than Cahokia, I believe, as far as the people who developed it. But this came from 1,000 years ago, and there's a great mystery coming from Mexico. The Mayans and the Aztecs, all of a sudden, boom, they vanished. And it's around the same time that this was developing, so it just seemed to me, and I believe I stated it in that video, I'm not sure, I haven't listened to that in a year, but I'm sure I talked about this seemed much more like what we find in Mexico. And basically, this was Mexico North. And if we go back to Google Earth, I think the only thing that is preventing historians from seeing that it was Mexico North, and I think this is important to say, and it really affects our views, is this is the location of Chaco Canyon, and we have the border of Mexico right here. So immediately, people just disassociate these ruins with anything we find in Mexico just because kind of it's found in the United States. And that is lame. This culture down in Mexico, the original culture started thousands and thousands of years ago, and it seems that their influence and probably even their cities spread throughout what we know as the United States now. I found Mayan symbolism as far north as Minnesota, and I will leave some links for some videos below. But now I want to play a clip from this channel here, and if you like talks on things such as Native American rock art, and they even have videos, a few talks on the Clovis people coming from 9,000 to 10,000 years ago that I thought was very interesting. And the ruins or the fossilized remains of some mammoths that were found at some of these sites, but they allow their videos to be shared. This is Archaeology Southwest. They have a lot of good talks, and go ahead and sub them if you like information like that. But they make their videos shareable, and I really appreciate that, because this gentleman that you're going to hear talk now shares a lot of my same views, and he is kind of opinionated, but I have no problem with that when it comes to ancient history. I know some other people who are quite opinionated who make ancient history videos, but I hope you enjoy the talk. I think there's some good information, and you all have a nice day.
Tonight's talk by Steve Lekson, and I think you probably have all heard of Steve, and you've heard certainly of Chaco Canyon before. So his talk tonight is, what was Chaco really?
Chaco Canyon, with a capital M, the mystery of Chaco Canyon, is a great failure of Southwestern archaeology. We've been working there, not we, me personally, I just retired, but I'm not this old. We've been working there for over 100 years, all right? There's been a lot of really smart people working at Chaco, and that isn't me either, but a lot of smart people putting a lot of money, energy and money, your money, a lot of your money into Chaco for 100 years. And the archaeology there's pretty easy, okay, compared to what goes on around here. They didn't build a city on top of it. I mean, Chaco's there. You're going to walk into the building's still standing up. You know, it had a bit of a history, maybe 500 years, but that, you know, in archaeology, that's nothing. That's not a big deal. It's the best dated site, if you take the whole canyon, probably in the whole world, a prehistoric site in the whole world, with all those, you know, at this point, tens of thousands of tree ring dates. It's, you know, wonderful preservation. You can see it. You don't have to dig Phoenix off of it. It's not that old, and it's not that strange. You know, it's just, maybe I'll get to what I think about it. You know, it's not Easter Island. It's not Stonehenge. It's an agricultural society on the north edge of Mexico. The fact that archaeologists, and I brought some quotes with me, I'll pull those out later probably, that the archaeologists are content to have it be a mystery is kind of an admission to defeat. And frankly, if I were you guys, I'd ask for your money back. It's ridiculous. We should, you know, we get paid to figure these things out. That's what we get paid to do. Recently, I had some ideas about Chaco where I said, I think this kind of solves that mystery, meaning, you know, buying into the hype of the mystery, that you know, this is probably the solution. And I get hate mail for this. Yeah, archaeologists are really interested in keeping it a mystery. Many of you I know my good friend, and I would like to call him my mentor, Gwen Vivian, who is by the grand old man of Chaco for sure. Gwen wrote a really cool book with Bruce Hilpert from down at ASM called the Chaco Handbook, and I bet some of you own it. If you don't, if you're interested in Chaco, it's worth the investment. It went into a second edition in 2012, and Gwen and Bruce, in sort of the introduction, say that, you know, of course they're trying to sell books too, but Chaco Canyon presents Chaco Canyon presents the most enduring and intriguing questions of any prehistoric site in the world. Perhaps this is the biggest mystery of Chaco Canyon. For the present, the mystery of Chaco Canyon remains just that, a mystery. That's hers. This is important. Okay, that's important. You know, here's Gwen, who studied Chaco all his life. His father studied Chaco almost all his life, at least for rhetorical purposes, being content to say it's a mystery. And that appeals to a lot of us, too. We want to go out there and feel like it's mysterious. I would submit that if the boundary between the United States and Mexico wasn't there, it wouldn't be a mystery at all. I mean, that boundary wasn't there at 1000 AD, and you know, it's just the north end of Mexico. Archaeological opinions on Chaco are all over the map, and again, this to me is embarrassing. It's strange. It's, you know, we shouldn't allow it. Everybody should agree with me. That's okay. There's one group which at this point is more in the minority, although it's gaining speed again, that Chaco is Pueblo, that it's, you know, a canyon full of Pueblos. And Gwen Vivian would be, you know, probably, I thought, the rear guard of that. Chip Wills at UNM and Steve Plog, University of Virginia, are kind of crawling on that bandwagon, that it's a canyon full of agricultural villages. I'm not going to go through and make fun of my friends here, but that's not going to work because it's no place to grow corn. Navajo people that lived in Chaco Canyon, they knew how to grow corn. Navajo people were pretty good at growing corn. And the maximum population of Navajo people in Chaco at its height, according to Dave Brugge, who knows more about it than anybody else, is like 300 people. Maybe you can keep a few hundred people alive growing corn out there, but you can't keep 3,000 people alive growing corn at Chaco. And the evidence is almost incontrovertible that you have a class society from the architecture. I'll get back to that in a minute. That you don't have class societies where you have an upper class and a lower class, where you have nobles and commoners in pueblos. That's just not how pueblos work. But you have it at Chaco. And that's pretty hard to deny. Okay, so some archaeologists push that it's a pueblo, and that has a lot to do with modern heritage issues and modern pueblos' interest in the place. Stone cold clear is that you had two classes of people out there. You had people that lived in the great houses that were architecturally just night and day from the folks that lived in normal houses. You had the 1%ers on the hill, and you had the 99%ers who were living in 5 rooms and a kiva. 5 rooms and a kiva is like a little rubber stamp, and they're perfectly fine little houses that commoners lived in, but if you took the floor area of one of those commoner houses and compressed it, you could fit it in one room of Pueblo Bonito. The scale differences are just, you have to not want to see it. The people that don't like the idea of a political structure out there or a class structure, remember one review, a recent review, a very influential review, about Chaco that said, well, there are no palaces. We would, if this were a political system, we expect to see palaces. I'm sitting there thinking, Pueblo Bonito, I've calculated this, weighs 40,000 tons of sandstone stacked up 30 feet tall over the size of a Major League Baseball field. Why can't you see that? That's what that is. It's a palace, all right? We know from a number of analyses, or we think we know, from a number of analyses now that there's 500 rooms there and maybe 12 families, all right? So not all those rooms are part of houses. Some of those rooms are warehouses, some of those rooms are other functions, some of those rooms are just building to build, to be bigger than the other, the guys at Chetra It's literally that simple. But yeah, it's really, really clear that you have two classes of people. Gwen Vivian got around that. Gordon Vivian picked up on that. Vivian Sr. picked up on that and said, this is not going towards pueblos. You got the haves and the have-nots. Gwen Vivian explains that as two different ethnic groups, which, it's an interesting idea. Obviously, you can tell I don't agree. I just don't see that. And again, it's 40,000 tons stacked over a baseball field. What's so hard to see? And there's 6 more of them that big. So that was troublesome because I go into Chaco not knowing what to think about it, and all of a sudden I'm saying, hey, wait, it's really obvious that you got one class that's living in the great houses and another class of people that are living in the small houses. And subsequent work is just not mine, well, some of mine, but by lots of other people's borne that out, that the people in the great houses are living differently than the people in the small houses. People in the great houses are not working. They have people working for them, probably slaves. They're knocking back at Miller time and drinking cacao. They're wearing parrot feathers, which, that's a big deal in Mexico and macaws. They got copper dangling all over them and more turquoise than God. The people in the small houses don't have that stuff. And it's just, lots and lots of evidence stacked up now that you have an upper class and a lower class, a ruling class and nobles and commoners.